Welcome to Power Up, the podcast that uncovers the unique challenges women leaders face today. Join your hosts, Nat and Kristen, as we dive into the tough topics and provide actionable insights you can apply right now. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. A question came in recently from a senior leader sponsoring a young woman. For this, happened to be on a partnership track. But her concern was that, look, she is talented, but she's quiet in meetings and not speaking up or sharing opinions. Now, the sponsor's worried that she'll be overlooked for advancement and probably actually knows she might be based on historical data because she doesn't look or act like a leader in the traditional sense. But of course, this applies whether you're sponsoring someone towards partnership or exec or any senior role, be it people leadership or not. It's not just about quiet people, but maybe people that don't fit the traditional mold. So we wanted to tackle that today for said listener.
And if you are also tuning in as someone who's thinking about one of those roles, may have a sponsor or otherwise, take these hints are equally as relevant just to follow along on your own or consider on your own.
Yeah. I love, Nat, when we first talked about this, you pointed out probably the most obvious first step. We want to walk through a bit of a 3-step framework. Love threes. And you pointed out the obvious. I was going to kind of skip in immediately to what we're considering step 2 today. But you pointed out that there needed to be almost a reality check conversation. Like before starting coaching anyone on behaviors or talking to them about what they should do, it's actually having honest conversations about what the role requires versus maybe what that person wants. There could be a gap.
Yeah, and we've seen this all the time. We're huge fans of understanding what your strengths are and really identifying your superpowers, the things in that Venn diagram that cross over between the things that you are great at and the things that you love to do. And we've seen this all throughout history, right? Like up until relatively recently and still predominantly today, the only way to get to a leader, an authority or a formal leadership position is through people leadership and or through business development, sales, something that's there's very specific skills involved that get you into those positions. And what that means is that a lot of us jump into those positions knowing that's the path to the top or believing it's the path to the top without ever stopping to go, is this actually the kind of work that I enjoy doing? Is it playing to my superpowers? And if I'm not looking like the traditional person in this role, I don't behave like the 3 guys who went above me, how can I do this in a way that's authentic to me and still delivers what the role needs?
I think, yeah, even if it's the question mark of, I don't know, of course, I'm thinking of sports examples, and you'll have these talented athletes that just, they wake up and they're effectively like on the route to high performance athletes. Like they fit the mold. They've got the skills and the work ethic and the drive, and someone's told them very early in their lives exactly what success looks like and what success will take. And then you've got the group that they don't know that what they don't know, and a coach needs to come along and effectively be like, this is what caring for your body and going to bed early and the behaviors of a champion is like. And this is what it's going to take. Is this something that you want? And so I think it's the conscious choice of going, there's going to be some hard things and uncomfortable things that I need to put myself into. And speak up, as an example, can be an incredibly hard thing earlier on in your career. And maybe later for others. But it's this conscious choice of going, these are the things we have to flex and develop. Is this something that you care enough about?
Yeah, and we're definitely not here trying to put people off going for these roles. It's actually more getting out of denial about what these roles mean. And one of the things we've recently completed a sponsorship program trial for a bank here in New Zealand. And what we found a really interesting insight from it is that all the sponsors came in with this concept of broadening the horizon, looking to the future and going, what are the future skills, the future connections, the future things you will need to be successful? And a lot of the sponsees came in very much focused on their current path or the things that they might immediately need to take the next step. And it was a little bit of a clash of culture in the best way, because it actually meant that they were the most impactful. But I think a lot of us don't stop to think, what does the end goal look like? And we don't need to have a perfect idea. It doesn't need to be like in 10 years' time, I'm going to be doing exactly this. But one of the things that let's take the partnership, for example. When you look at a lot of the big four consulting firms, and actually a lot of consulting firms, the vast majority of partners are business development. They spend all their time on business development, their relationship building, their networking, their selling, they're then enabling teams behind them to deliver. And that is a certain set of skills, and it's a certain type of job that, I mean, I don't know. We've been doing a little bit of B2B sales. We've been doing business development. It is an entirely different skill than delivery or being amazing at the work and understanding the strategy and all of that sort of stuff. So I just think there is this moment of going, this is what the job actually looks like. Do I see myself wanting to go there? And if not, I also do believe in a lot of these organizations and in any organization, there are other routes. There is the I'm going to be the internal partner looking over this stuff, or I'm going to, but you kind of need to be clear on what the end goal is before figuring out the path to get there.
Do you think that I'm curious because there was a really strong movement in the past decade, which naturally we support, of bringing your whole self to work, although we say bring your best self to work, but there's increasing flex about be truly you and who you are and lead in your way and navigate in your way, which naturally we're proponents. But is there a misconception about who you are as a person and the skills required for a senior role, which is something where you have to have a voice and take up space and share your perspectives and at least build the skill towards doing that? Have we muddied the waters with this authentically you versus what is a successful skill?
I mean, I honestly think it boils down to what do you want to do, and like like you can build skills. That's that. I mean, it's hard work sometimes, but you can build it. But if you end up in a role where you are deeply unhappy, and I feel like a lot of people have ended up in these positions where they've sort of fallen into or worked like eyes closed, blinkers on to these roles, and get there and go, huh. I actually didn't even think about the reality of what I was aiming for, and I just think and they're not necessarily loving it. And I've seen this very early stage in careers. A lot of people become like a lawyer or accountant because they feel pressure from their family. They spend 5 years in that role going, is this what this is? Like all I got told was that I should be doing it, not what it is. So I do think from my perspective, it is largely about what you actually want to be doing because there's so many different successful roles. And even if we just limit it to senior leadership roles, there are so many different paths. We had a fabulous woman leader speak to a role model yesterday, speak to our members. And when you look at how she leads a consulting company and the approach she takes, that's very different from what she might be in a different consulting company or what a different consulting company might need. So, like, I don't think either of us is saying shut down the options. It's just saying, is this the right role or is this the right path for me?
Or even actually thinking on that, I was chatting with someone the other day who said she used to work for one of the big mining consulting companies and now works for a small one. And she talked a lot about alignment of values. And she said it was a cultural and alignment fit. So I just didn't fit in that organization and culture. However, I can do the same role at a very senior level in this organization because it fits. And I think the same can be said for those partnership track roles, be it in law firms or consultancies. There are lots of options. There's smaller organizations, and equally, you can say that with corporate versus startup. You can actually go wider in the reality check and go, this is what it looks like for this organization. Um, but it could look different. The same role, a senior leadership role, and a different one.
Yeah, and I mean, we hear this all the time with people who say, I want to leave my corporate role to start my own business because I don't want a boss. And my first reaction to that is, you don't know what it's like to run a business yet. Like, go forth and really look into the reality of having actually 1,000 bosses and unclear revenue. And like, we have this dream state of what these roles can sometimes look like. That shouldn't put you off. I think to what you're bringing up is sort of the nuance of the fine line we have to walk, because I was speaking to an epic power suitor yesterday, and she's found herself, she's actually working her way out of it, but she was in an organization with a culture that wasn't the right fit for her. It does sound like a pretty old school, very traditional, culture, she's been given lots of feedback around being emotional, which is one of our favorite pieces of criticism, because what are you going to do about it? We're all emotional. And had never really received any performance reviews, like literally blank, from management. And she's like moved roles now, and is sort of recovering from that. But I look at that and go, here is the options we have from a micro and macro level. From a micro level, you can stay and fight that system. You can be authentically you and change the label, not the wine, and adapt to the situation as much as you can and influence from the inside as much as you can. And you will be deeply unhappy. Mostly. Some people really thrive in that sort of challenge. Some people don't. Or you can leave and go somewhere where it's a better fit. From a micro level, you're better off. But I do sometimes wonder from a macro level, that's where the nuance is, because sometimes you think if enough women fight their way into these roles, or enough people who don't fit the mold fight their way into these roles, they will change it from the inside. But the other way of looking at it is they actually all leave, and these dinosaur organizations die because they are not attracting that diverse talent. And one of the fundamental beliefs of diversity as a business tool is that without it, you probably don't have a competitive advantage. So maybe at a macro level, if we leave those environments, it actually works out better anyway, because they kind of just shrink and become irrelevant.
I love it. Reality check conversation. So good first step is just to actually start to have some conversations about the reality of the role itself, and really questioning if that is what indeed the person wants, to put the work in. And I love step 2 is actually going into more of an observation step, which is finding their leadership style, giving them the space and the encouragement to start to observe people in their organizations. And that was something else you were thinking of, Nat. So do share.
Well, I think this is another thing, and particularly if you're a sponsor or a mentor or a leader and you've clocked someone who you think has a lot of potential and you want to help lower the ladder and help them climb up. But we all have bias. And one of our biases is that we kind of want them to look like us, or we kind of want them to follow in our own path, or we see something of ourselves in them. Whereas actually, everyone, there's as many leadership styles on the planet as there are people. So I think once you kind of know, let's say you've decided, look, I'm still interested, not 100% sure if I am wanting to step into this eventual role, but there's enough there to make me interested, and I'm really keen to give it a red hot go. Now's the time to kind of go, what does it look like to you to be a leader? And a leader as you're stepping up? And what does it look like for you to run those roles? And again, we see this all the time where women will come to us saying, I'm not sure if I can do this role because I'm looking to the 3 guys who did it before me, and they're out till 10 p.m. having client drinks. They have golfing in the weekend with people. They walk into the room and everyone doesn't stop talking about sports. And so I'm constantly trying to figure out how to fit into this environment. But what we actually can do is, instead of trying to give up on who we are and fit in, we can instead take the time to get really clear on who we are, how we add value. So we walk into those rooms and are really confident in our own style. And I think, again, our fabulous role model yesterday said this, like, there's always that tension of, am I only here because I'm a woman? And I'm going to put aside all the ridiculousness of how we've been trained to believe that. But actually to go, I know I can add value in this role. And that comes from understanding what kind of leader we are.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is there is not just one way to lead, and that is the nuance here. Is there's not just one way to lead, but there are minimum behaviors required to lead. But it's about adopting, finding your style, and thankfully, in most rooms nowadays, and we encourage our power suitors to do this a lot when we talk about influence, for example. Like, watch around the room about who. Different styles that people take, like for introverts as an example, and we've worked with a bunch of them. They may be quiet during the meeting, but when it is their time to share, people listen. They will have thought and reflected during the meeting, or perhaps had prepped before, but when they talk, people listen. So it's not necessarily you have to have a dominant style, but it is a minimum required behavior of sharing your perspective. So how do people do that based on whatever's natural to them, and start to really observe in all meetings?
It was actually, I was having a great conversation with my personal board of directors, and several of them are on non-personal boards. And one of them was talking about exactly this scenario. Firstly, one of the boards she's on, the expectation is if you turn up, you have an opinion on every matter that's discussed. There's no ability to go, this isn't my area, which I personally believe is fundamental to governance. You should be across everything and you should be able to have an opinion. And up until then, we're working towards it, right? We're getting into more and more cross-functional thinking, understanding the different levers of a business. So it is a really good muscle to hone of how do I start to build my perspective in different areas. The second thing she did was literally observe. She watches leaders around her all the time. So she ran an experiment in a board meeting where it was a bunch of, well, it wasn't a board meeting, it was some of the board meeting with external stakeholders who hadn't met her before. And she knew they were looking to her going, who's she and why is she here? But she had observed some really powerful leaders. And one of them, particularly, and she was telling us, was like, he will turn up to a meeting and not say anything at all. And even if people ask him questions, he just diverts it to, I would like to know what you think. And then at the end, he will come out with 4 or 5 very powerful points, wrap up the meeting, and that's how he sees his role. So she tried it. And that was her opportunity. She didn't have to stick with it forever to really try on that leadership style or that meeting style for size. In other meetings, most of us are contributors. So she would behave very differently. And I think, again, this is that ideal time when you are looking forward and going, we're going to get from A to B, we want to observe things, observe leaders that you go, oh, I see how they're operating, not just from a like surface level, but like, why do they operate like that? What is their philosophy behind it? Ask them about it and then see if that feels natural to you. And that example just struck me as such a perfect one of, you don't have to stick to that. That's not necessarily her style, but she's learning about it, seeing some parts of it that really work for her and trying them on in various situations where it makes sense.
Yeah, love it. So as a sponsor, it's effectively just having conversations, encouraging them to observe, having conversations about what they're seeing, what they're noticing, and then encouraging them to experiment with those style shifts. And experiment being like, if that didn't feel great, try something else the next time.
Yeah.
Yeah, love it.
And I think
Yeah.
that's what we've learned as well about sponsors is your job is to open doors and make connections. So you may be in a position to introduce them to 3 or 4 different leaders who you've observed to have really different leadership styles and allow them to have conversations to go, how do you do it? What is your approach in meetings? What is your approach to this? And start to really build that evidence and understanding of different styles and deep understanding of different styles, not just sort of watching someone in the moment and making assumptions.
Yeah, which moves nicely to step 3, which is actually, as a sponsor, creating those practice opportunities. So, and this isn't about throwing them in the deep end in a high stakes environment. Like, oh, by the way, we're having a partnership meeting and you're on to give the update. It's actually about getting those low reps in. And so, what are all the small things that you, as a sponsor, coach, mentor, or people leader, can do to create opportunities for those people to flex and to develop as they're navigating some slight style shifts of whatever the behaviors are the minimum standard for that leadership role. So it could be things like small updates in team meetings, for example, and start them small with something like that. Or if you can prep for an external stakeholder or client call, like what would that look like to have them participate in that? Small things.
Yeah, and also, I mean, obviously we're huge fans of role playing. Like if you do have a meeting coming up or an interview or whatever it might be, actually practice with someone and try these things on for size. And there's some even very, very basic tips. I've heard recently, have a sip of water before you answer the question. That doesn't feel for me authentic because I feel like it could easily be also way to look nervous, when people are like sipping water and but maybe taking a deep breath or pausing. Like a lot of us feel this immense pressure to answer straight away, and taking a pause actually showcases you are considering it, you are coming up with a more refined answer, and also gives you that moment or two to think. So practice even in a micro way those little changes to how you communicate in meetings or in those situations, and try and put yourself in them or put someone else in them. And I mean, this is the experimental stage, right? We're practicing different things, we're honing different skills, we're refining our approach. And I think underpinning all of this is the expectation that you are a beginner at this. And being a beginner at anything means you have to spend a lot of time practicing, like in sports, training, building up different skills. It's like hitting the tennis ball 1,000 times. You are micro pausing 1,000 times, or answering 1,000 questions in 1,000 different ways, and just recognizing that all of this is about building skills, not necessarily having to be great at it right away.
Yeah. I was thinking about this because it is really easy to fall into the again, going back to what does a leader look like, and to fall in the disappointment of these really traditional leadership traits. But if we're to strip back and to go, oh, we should be able to be this or be that in a leadership role. But if we're to strip everything back and look at and think about that description of what a leader is, it is to kind of engage, like people effectively want to follow you. So it doesn't even mean the title, for example, but a group of people are willing to follow you. You have either inspired or motivated them to work, collectively towards a shared or common goal, or whatever success is like. And that can, again, happen at all levels, but that is leadership. And it does take expression of perspective and of that collective success, and being able to communicate that with impact. And so I think that is the key, rather than going, oh, you have to speak in that voice or exhibit these mannerisms. Although, again, we are judged on that as well, still, you know?
Yeah, but I mean, again, I kind of looked at our role model session yesterday, and like there was a moment where this fabulous woman was talking about an unexpected pregnancy at 19, and she was very careful to make it very clear that she loves her child madly and wouldn't change anything now. But you're 19, you hadn't met the child yet, all of that stuff kicks in, and she's telling this story, and there is just like this stream of love hearts coming up through the Zoom call. And sometimes we have this idea of what people want from leaders as well, which is again really traditional. And this idea that actually there was, in a room that is quite diverse in terms of culture and gender, there are people desperate to see leaders who they identify with. And I think part of baked into all of these assumptions is that we're talking to one group of people who is the traditional group of people you'd be speaking to. And actually, the world looks quite different now. And leadership has to look quite different now. And so it is actually okay to recognize that something that you may never have seen before actually is one of the most powerful ways to get people on board, because there's a whole ton of people who haven't been spoken to or felt any sort of connection with leaders of the past.
Yeah, I was just thinking of actually another interview that we had with Courtney Johnston, who is the CE of Te Papa in Wellington, and she actually talks about. She swears a lot to grab attention, so she actually had to step in. She's diminutive in size, and so she had to experiment with different ways to get people's attention and to command a room. And she was like quite open with, that's like it's not herself, because that might be indeed herself, her behind closed doors. But I feel like that was just really interesting, where she had to recognize small style shifts to actually command a room as a tiny woman. It was amazing.
Oh yeah, and I so agree, and I think she was saying that she sort of just leaned into her natural tendencies and was kind of and kind of said it was unexpected for people because they made assumptions about who she was when
That's
she walked
right.
in. But I was thinking the same this week, because obviously my word of the year, I don't know if we've shared it on the podcast yet, but it's sustainable. And I've trying to run twice this week, and very few gaps in my calendar. I'd created them, but it was pouring with rain on the gap. So I had a meeting in town, and I was like, I'm going to run home from this meeting in town. And that was a slight awkwardness for me, because I was like, I'm going to turn up. I've never met this person in real life before, in my activewear. And I immediately had this sense of, oh, is that unprofessional? Is that going to place me in a certain light? Instead, we had a fabulous conversation about running. She's also a runner. And I suddenly thought that is actually what leadership looks like authentically, is behaving in a way that is appropriate. Like I ran home, not there, so I wasn't sweaty and gross. And showing the path that that you lead, and other people then can go, oh, I can do this too. And it feels uncomfortable. Like that felt uncomfortable to me. I've done it before with a few people that we kind of know a bit better, but now I'm like, actually, that could be something. It was one experiment, but it's something that I'm going to try more, because it solves my exercise problem. It's a half-hour jog home from town, but also it shows a little bit more of who I am in a way that may inspire other people to think about the way they lead their lives.
Yeah, I love that. But I do think that you probably had that layer of this was a coffee, a one-on-one coffee. Like I would like I'm not would you show up to a board meeting in your activewear?
Yeah, probably. And I think and it probably depends on the environment, but then that probably sort of goes back to point one of which environments do I feel like I thrive in? And and for me, if it was an environment where I had to wear heels and I don't know, pencil skirt, that's not me. And so like, do I turn up to that environment? Or, or if I do, am I comfortable being myself in that environment? So there's probably, again, it's changing the label, not the wine. Am I going to turn up on day one? No. But I've got to say, the board observer role that I'm doing now, day one, we did talk about running, and that kind of created this environment where we all sort of turn up as we are. Well, we didn't create it, they already had that environment, but we do all turn up as we are. So, yeah, I do think so. But it's the experiment of, I'm going to try it in this situation. Did that work? Okay. I'm not going to just go like, all in with a new way of communicating or whatever. But I think you're allowed to, yeah, experiment with that stuff.
Love it. Love it. Thanks, everyone. Hope that was helpful. Please do share the episode. And those listening on Apple, give us a 5-star. For some reason, we have a gazillion 5-star reviews on Spotify, but not Apple. even though 60% of our listeners are on Apple. 60% of our listeners are on Apple. I was like, they must be making it hard because y'all love us, right?
Or maybe people aren't listening on Apple. Maybe
No,
because we
they are.
post a lot of things
60%.
on. Is it?
60%.
Ah,
Yeah.
Apple, what are you doing?
I know. Anyway, I'm like, come on, let's run an experiment. Please do give us a 5-star review. Our gorgeous Apple listeners, just find it, and let us know what's going on. Yeah, and check out powersnoot.com.
Do podcasters always talk about this? But just so you know, if you are sitting there going, can I be bothered spending 2 seconds finding this? It actually makes a huge difference to the success of the podcast. Like the reviews do get us further up search engines and all sorts of stuff. So it is a very, very simple thing you can do to have quite a big impact. And also, it's a really nice thing to receive. Like it is the highest praise for us for this podcast is like, oh, someone went out of their way to like it. And that sounds really silly, but it is a one-way street a lot of the time. So that's your two-way street back sometimes.
Do you know what I was just thinking? Is I am an Apple listener, so I'm like, I bet you I haven't even given us a 5 stars, and I'm on a podcast that I enjoy at the moment, so I'm just looking, and yeah, it isn't immediately apparent. So I guess I'm gonna have to do a little bit of a search. But I'm like, surely we can do this, people.
Well, I thank you
Anyway,
so much for the 5 people who have gone out of their way to figure it out because it sounds like it's hard.
no, it's not immediately obvious, but nonetheless, please rating.
Please do it
Oh,
anyway.
I don't know what's going on. Anyway, thanks everyone. Yeah, we will look together, and then I'll share it next time. So tune in next time, and we'll catch you then. Bye.